Well, hello again, and welcome to another episode of Sermon B-Sides. My name is Rusten. I'm one of the pastors at Cormdale Church, and I'm here with my pastor friend, Pastor Jon. How you doing, Pastor Jon?
Hey, this is episode 101.
101.
Special.
Exactly, yep. We just
That
did
means,
100, so this is...
If we're 101, that means we're taking the long way, the scenic route. Highway 101.
I was going to say, isn't there a Wild Turkey 101 too? Is that not a thing? So
I think there is. That actually came up in conversation. What was it last week with my buddies? I was like, I've never had wild turkey, so I don't think I have.
There's a special bottle Wild Turkey has called Rare Breed, and Pastor Kim shared some of that with me. It's pretty good. It's like their special.
Is it good?
Like, yeah, it's like it's weird because Wild Turkey is kind of known for being like low shelf with bourbon, right?
Yeah.
But like a lot of these whiskey companies that have the low shelf bourbon also just do tons of good whiskeys that you don't know about, and then they release these special editions occasionally because they've been doing it for years, so they know what they're doing. And so the Rare Breed Wild Turkey is pretty good. And there's a special version of it that he had that was like really rare because it was like a messed up batch, but everybody really liked it, so it was a special bottling. But yeah, I like a good Wild Turkey. Hey, we did it. It
doesn't come in a plastic bottle, does it?
Well, no, none of those special ones do. But like the low shelf stuff, I think
they
sometimes
do?
does. I think maybe they do. I don't know.
That's the sign that you have a problem.
I haven't. Yeah. When you're drinking out of a plastic bottle, like Monarch.
Boy.
Yeah. Hey, we started this B-Sides with the whiskey tasting reference.
There you go.
It's been a long time coming. Okay, so we're back in the 10 Commandments. We're looking at the second commandment and the sermon on the second commandment, which is all about graven images. Yeah. So with this commandment, if you haven't already listened to the previous episode, I recommend it because everything about the law, flows out of the posture. We're going to talk about flows out of this posture. Like the previous episode, we talked a lot about the heart delighting in the law and how the law is for our flourishing. So that's important when you look at every command. But this question is the question about images. I think you did a good job explaining that there's a lot of interesting debates around images, and some people read this and go, this is like explicitly against making any images, not just so can you in a nutshell give us the what's the gist of this commandment and what it's saying and what it's not saying?
Yeah, so it depends on who you ask. So some people think this is part of the first commandment, and they get to 10 by splitting the last one. I think I mentioned that briefly in the sermon. Like, there's different ways of rearranging the two tables of the law. There's also different ways of arranging the numbers, but they all end up with 10. So, I think
the Roman, it's the Roman Catholic and the Lutherans who do that. I think, right?
Yes, who combine the first and the second. I believe so.
Yeah.
So yeah, it sounds like it's saying don't make anything, don't create anything, no carved images. But we know that's not true because in a couple chapters we have a description of the temple, and there's instructions to create with the ark 2 cherubim, which are angels, and this was in the temple. So either God forgot or changed the rules really quick. Maybe God's a dispensationalist, and in 5 chapters it all. Just kidding, but it's clear that
I'm sorry, my dispensationalist friends, but you kind of did it to yourself.
Okay. We love them.
We love them
genuinely. But so it obviously can't be a prohibition against all art, and then some people will go, well, it's just a prohibition against art like in places of worship. But again, the cherubim were in the temple, so it can't be that.
Yep.
And so I think what this commandment is clearly about is the use of images in worship. And that makes it clear when it says, shall not bow down to them or serve them. That's the issue. It's not the creating of it. It's not the presence of it. It is the bowing down or serving them, which some people think that this is just an echo of the first commandment. Like the first commandment is no other gods in your heart. And the second
Yeah.
commandment is, well, no other gods kind of figured out there. But
Yeah.
the first commandment is about whom we worship, right? The one true living God. And this commandment is about how we worship that one
Yep.
living
It's the how.
God. Yeah.
Yep.
And one of the things that's really interesting is that what is it called? It's called mirroring, right? When you're looking at a text and there's things that are clearly implied. Like, for example, the first commandment is about which God we worship, and the implication is that we're going to worship some God. That
Mm-hmm.
that not worshiping is not an option that's on the table. This commandment tells us that we know there must be some way that we access that one true God, right? It's not about who that one God is, but
Yes.
it's how do you access that one true God? And
Yep.
so the temptation is to create an image that 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 God would somehow either indwell that image, or that image is kind of like this doorway,
Yeah.
this access point to that God, because that God is in the heavens and we're on the earth. So where do you go to meet? Right.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to solve that problem by creating an image that is either indwelt by God or an access, or most likely both, an access point
Yeah.
to God. And so this commandment says, don't do that.
Which was the common practice of the day, also, right?
Yeah.
That was the common practice of the day. You have different instances of, even I think leading up to this point, where I think that someone steals the household gods, right? I think one of Jacob's,
Yeah.
I think no, like steals the household
One of the daughters.
gods
Yeah.
as, yes, and like sits on them, and it's like, oh, don't,
She's
I'm
she's the way of a
the way of the woman is with her, so they're like, okay, we're not gonna have you stand up. Um, so but this idea of household gods was, every house, if you're going to worship God in your house, you had to have some image of him by which you
Yep.
access him. So the image
Right.
became the mediator, and
Correct.
and so this is a prohibition against that way of worship, which was basically contradicting the ways of worship that were currently in the world. and
Yeah.
and and you even see this, an example of this a violation of this command immediately during the time when the Ten Commandments are given, right? Because the golden calf
Absolutely.
example,
Absolutely.
right? They were not worshiping a golden calf, or they didn't believe they were, but they
Hmm.
they said, this is the Lord, this is
Right.
Yahweh,
Right.
who
Yeah.
has brought you up out of Egypt. And so they were wanting to worship Yahweh, but they had crafted a golden calf to represent him,
To represent him.
right?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
so that's the problem.
Correct.
And so no, with this question comes a lot of, there's a lot of quirky questions that you might tag on to the question about images in terms of application today. One
Yeah.
of those questions I have is like more classic, very classic question in terms of church
Yeah.
history, and then the other question is more modern. Okay, so the first question is this:
Okay. What's the
Eastern,
class? What,
what's that?
ask the classic one. That's what I was saying. Yeah.
Okay, the classic one. The classic one is, so Eastern Orthodox. Okay,
Okay.
the
Yep.
Eastern Orthodox have kind of like carved out this like weird little, like, well, we're not worshiping these things, but they
Mm,
they they make icons, both of
correct.
saints and of God
Yeah.
and of
Yeah.
Christ, and they treat them as this, like, uh, they venerate them, they pray to them. But when you ask them about like what they're doing, they would say, like, during in their worship, they believe that as they are, going to worship, they are actually like symbolically entering the heavenlies, right?
Yeah.
And these icons are like the pictures, the family pictures of those people that are in the heavenlies, like the saints that have died and are in heaven, the Lord who
Hmm.
is in heaven, right? And so they treat these icons as a mediation of heaven.
Mm, mm.
And so what would you say to that Eastern Orthodox view? Because I think it's violating the second commandment.
Yeah. So I have a dear friend who's Orthodox and has explained some of
Yeah,
this to me. And yeah, to me it seems like um if you've got icons to remind you that, because we would agree when you gather for worship, you're being caught up into the heavenlies,
I would.
right?
Yeah,
Like
I
you
actually
100% agree
love.
with that.
Yeah, I love the Eastern Orthodox understanding of what is happening during church. I
Yeah.
think that they're more right on than most people in terms of when
Yep.
we gather together, we are, as the body gathers, entering the heavenlies, and there's like we're entering heavenly courts, but it's like signified and sealed by the what God promised He would do with His people, and then when two or more are gathered, I'm with them, right? So
Yeah.
there is a
Correct.
and there's offices because it's a court, it's a court. So what you know but when you start to use images as your mediating factor, right? I this is where I think you guys, I like what mindset is, but you're making these images functionary mediators for um worship, what the worship's doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think once you see either God like indwelling the icon,
Mm-hmm.
or the icon as mediator or
Yep.
like access point, then I think you're in violating second commandment territory.
Yeah,
That's
and that's a classic issue that Reformed people have with Eastern Orthodox. I love Eastern Orthodox people. I'm just like, stop doing that.
yeah. Yeah. One of the things that is really great about the Orthodox churches, which I appreciate, is like they are more willing to embrace mystery
Yeah. Oh
than
yeah. Hmm.
some of the Reformed. It's like in the Reformed tradition, everything can be explained. Sometimes it
Hmm.
feels that way, and it's like,
Yeah.
um, but the Orthodox, like, well, we don't know communion. I don't
Yeah.
know, you know.
We just do it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't
No.
know
I.
God. Yeah,
I. I.
which
I.
I love
I
that
have.
simplicity.
Yeah. I've always had a strong attraction for the Eastern Orthodox Church. I actually did a big. I remember in college I did this big research project on it because I was in. I actually really like the look of Eastern Orthodox icons.
Hmm.
Like they just like because they have very specific rules on how they can be made, right?
Oh,
And
okay.
it's really funny because when you look at these old icons of these old saints and what they're wearing, then you look at like a Eastern Orthodox priest and what he's wearing today. You're like, they're wearing the same stuff. They're doing it
Same stuff.
like
Yeah,
it's the same things going on. So I've always enjoyed, and I do appreciate their their acceptance of mystery, and um I love that they're like insistence on not changing, like, so there's a joke I think that like the Eastern Orthodox, um you know there's how do how many Eastern Orthodox priests does it take to change a light bulb? And the joke is
yeah,
they go, what is this change you speak of?
yeah.
What is this change
That's
you
good.
speak of?
That's good.
so so but at the same time, that's the one areas I've talked with people I know and love that are Eastern Orthodox. We have a family at our church who has a sibling that is a good friend of mine that is Eastern Orthodox, and I'm always like, this is the
Mm,
issue, man. I love what you're, but this is
yes.
like
Yeah.
dangerous. And I so like, that's I feel like you can still do that in a brotherly way, but
Yeah.
that's my concern. So
Yeah.
okay, so that's the classic one. And
Yeah.
I think that gives you an example of how there have been very you know at least the Eastern Orthodox are in error through really intentional thinking. I mean they're still trying to deny it, but I think that they've really been intentional about it, and so they put a lot of thought into it, which can be good or bad, I guess. But
Yeah.
okay, so then the question is, okay, so this is a question you'll get from a person in the pew on a regular
Mhm.
basis.
Mhm.
Can I watch The Chosen?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, okay,
or
let me up the ante. Should you
yeah.
watch The Passion?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, because yeah, at least Mormons didn't make. I mean, Mel Gibson is better than a Mormon, I think. They,
For sure. For
so
sure.
no, yeah. So this is a good question. So,
Yeah.
um, I I'll be honest. I've always been a little torn on it. I really respect the people who would say it's a second covenant or commandment violation. It's really funny if you're in like reformed Facebook groups or something like that. You'll often have people share like, I love this new book I got, but then like they'll put blocks on different like if the book has the picture of Jesus in the front, they'll put
Yeah.
little like blocks on it and say 2CV violation 2C.
Yeah.
So but I don't know, like I'm very sympathetic towards the don't make images of Jesus view, and here's the reason why. It's not because the okay, on the one side, Jesus had a real human nature, which means he could have been drawn.
Correct.
So that is a very very good reason for why some you might say you can draw Jesus, you can depict Jesus, because he had a real human nature common to us all, and we can be drawn, thus he can be drawn, right? The issue becomes like, it's kind of like maybe it's more of an application in one sense, an application versus a principle. So an application of drawing image that you would want to avoid would be accidentally worshiping the image, right?
Yeah.
So, and that might happen I mean, sometimes it seems like the Roman Catholics don't, or the Eastern Orthodox don't believe they're doing that, but it seems like they are. And then, you might, there's a little bit of like the brass, remember the brass snake that Moses made? Like God
Yeah.
told him to make that thing, and it was good, and it was used properly. But then they started worshiping it, right?
Yeah.
So there's a little bit like that's not a problem in principle of making the bronze snake. God said to make it, right? So it's the principle of you can worship anything. So these things can be issues. So if that's all that's going on with the chosen, then I'm like, well, there's nothing wrong with making the image or depicting Christ's human nature. The issue becomes with what you do with it. But here's the one other thing that I'd say makes me more sympathetic to the view. We just don't know what Jesus looked like. So any depiction becomes...
Well, we know that what he didn't look like.
Do we?
He wasn't white.
He wasn't white. Oh, we yeah. Exactly. So this is exactly the reason why I find this difficult, because we don't know what he looked like. We don't even have a description of his features in the Bible. We have the only time we get a description of his features in the Bible are in Revelation, where he's being described very apocalyptically with like symbolics, like cotton white hair, and
Yes. And in Isaiah 53, we know that he's not attractive.
Yeah. We know, yes, we know he's not. I never knew if that was because he had been so beaten, or if it was because he was not attractive first. So, what do you I all that to say, if you depict Jesus a certain way, you're kind of necessarily, there's a little bit of a fraudulency there, I guess. That's like potentially you're lying about the particular, which is unavoidable if you don't know what he actually looked like.
Right.
So
and like you said, we have no record. There's no sketches. There's no descriptions.
Yep.
We don't know. So
and the potential problem with that is that if you depict him, people are different, and so people use, I think that Paul at one point says we once regarded Christ according to the flesh, but we no longer do. And so the concern I have is like, okay, so maybe there's some credence to like, if you didn't make Jesus in your image, your ethnicity's image, you might not accidentally convey that he's for our people, right? He's one of us, right? In the tribal wars, whatever. And that's one concern of an application, but I don't even think that is necessarily a violation of the second commandment, if that makes sense. That would be more like a violation of the ninth commandment, like lying, right? So I don't know. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it, though.
Yeah, so I was asked this after the sermon, and it was specifically a Chosen. I was like, well, I don't know if I'd watch the Chosen, but it might be for a different reason. I think you have to be careful. The second commandment is explicitly concerned with bowing down, right? It's not the viewing of an image. It's not seeing an image.
Yep, exactly.
It's the bowing down to the image. And so there's obviously a physical element to that, but it's more than physical. There's this capturing of the heart and the affections and the minds and So I've watched The Passion a handful of times, and I've never like caught myself getting caught up with the actual actor or the portrayal
Like
of it, you
worshiping
know?
Jim Caviezel, you know.
No, I've never felt that.
Yeah.
It's always been a beyond,
Mm-hmm.
this is helping me see with my eyes something that actually took place, which is
Yeah.
described, but it's different when
Yeah.
you're seeing a back
Yeah.
that's been, whipped and flesh that's
Yeah.
torn. And
Yeah.
yeah, so maybe that's a wishy-washy answer, but
I get it.
I with the exception of The Passion, I don't like images. I don't like
Yeah.
images of Christ. Like, they make me feel weird.
Yeah. There's
Um,
a weird. It's almost like it's um you're you don't want you don't want to, when you read scripture, have an actor's face in your head,
yes,
right?
yeah, for
And you don't
sure, yeah,
you, and
yeah,
you don't want to, when you read scripture, even have a certain like bake into that depiction of Jesus in the scriptures a kind of persona tone, like all the things that aren't captured in the text, right?
yes,
So like I
yeah,
remember growing up, we watched it.
for sure.
We used to watch at my house a a movie called, I think it was just called Jesus, and it was like it kind of told the story of Jesus leading up to his crucifixion. And in my mind forever, like that actor was kind of like the way he was
Hmm.
soft spoken, and he wasn't actually, I think that it was actually a better done than some other versions. But like, if you look at uh Scorsese's picture of Jesus, he was basically a hippie. He was
Yeah,
like a,
yeah,
and so, now you watch the image, you've taken in the persona, and you read scripture, and now Jesus in the scriptures is a hippie, right?
he's a hippie,
So there's
right? Yeah,
danger there.
yeah,
there's
yep,
there's danger with some of those things, and I think that the images have a way of just getting to our heart fast,
yeah,
so
yep.
that's the danger. So I think I'd be like, it'd be less of a you're violating the second commandment, and more of a, I'm really concerned you're going to worship that golden or that brass serpent. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Yep.
like like there's a tendency to be captivated by images, or or to define what you're reading by images. So
Yeah.
yeah, but at the same time, I love classical Christian art. Like, I love
Yes.
it. I
Yeah,
love
I do
I
too.
love Rembrandt. Uh I love Rembrandt's depiction of Christ, and what's this, Caravaggio. I think that Mel Gibson actually based his entire like framing of certain scenes in the Passion on
Mhm.
Caravaggio's depictions of Christ crucified. So I'm like,
Wow.
it's I think it's like, be careful, right? Be
Yeah.
careful. We're back after a quick pause. We're back at it now. So images, one of the things we were talking about was the question of, there's more of a warning. Some of these things, the question of images of Jesus, I think, is because Jesus had a human nature, he could be depicted. The question is, there's maybe some danger there, right? Like, it's more like
Yeah.
the brass snake than it is about the violation of the second commandment, unless you are actually using the images themselves
I
to
yeah. I,
as an
I
access point.
I think we're in a different position, and this is maybe where we can go next with the commandment, because
Yeah.
when this commandment is spoken to them,
Hmm.
um, right, they want an image,
Yep.
and I want to say it's not wrong to want an image, to have
Sure.
the icon that God dwells in and that is the access point, because I think we would call that a mediator. And so the
Hmm.
desire for that isn't in and of itself like inherently corrupt, but it's the making it with your hands. That's the problem. And
Hmm.
there's something about the second
Hmm.
commandment, and also Edmund Clowney in his commentary on it, he points this out, which is great. When you have the Ark of the Covenant made, and you've got the cherubim, and then you have the mercy seat,
Hmm.
but the mercy seat is empty, and
Hmm.
it's waiting for someone to enter the temple to take their seat, right? And
Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
second commandment is that it's anticipatory, it's pregnant with promise, and that it's like don't make an image. Don't make an image. It's like God knows that we have this impulse for there to be an image. Don't make it, because the image is actually coming. Like,
Yep.
God's image is coming, and that
Yep.
image will, the fullness of God will dwell in that image, and that image will be the door, that the access point, the way
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
come to the Father, that we come to heaven. But it's not one
Yeah.
that we make. It's not
Yep.
even man-made. There you go, virgin
Yep.
birth, right? But there is
Exactly.
an image, and we do need the
Yep.
image, but you just have
Yeah.
to wait for that image.
It reminds me of, so you mentioned the mercy seat, and what goes into the Ark of the Covenant is the staff,
The law,
the law, and the
some
manna,
manna. Yeah.
right? And I've
Yep.
I've often read that and go, I think that's a reference to the way, the truth, and the life,
Mm.
the and how
Yeah.
Christ fulfills each one of those things. He is, and it's a mercy seat, so it's like it's waiting, but it also has within it, placed within it, the anticipation of who's coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's good.
Yeah.
So one of the things we need to talk about before we end this, and I think we have probably like 5 minutes,
Okay.
is children.
Oh yeah.
The covenant implications of
Yeah.
idolatry, worshiping an idol, and I will, for those who break this command, I will visit. I'm not having the commandment right in front of me, so I don't want to mess it up.
Yeah, visiting
So
the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. Yeah.
yes, so there's a generational implication, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both for idolatry and for faithfulness. Could you
Correct.
talk a little bit about that and what you mentioned? Because that was a very, I think, valuable, and it's very, to me, what's really interesting is that it's connected to this commandment. That's very interesting to me. So
Yeah.
maybe can explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So I think what God is saying here is that worship is always contagious, and if it's idolatrous worship, it's contagious. If it's true worship, it's
Mm-hmm.
contagious, because the
Mm-hmm.
kids pick up on it. The
Yep.
the iniquity that is visited on the children of the third and fourth generations is not the dad screwed up, and so now the grandkids are paying for it, but it's that they've learned this idolatry from their father, and that has a generational impact.
Yep.
Which really entered the fourth generation of those who hate me, but in contrast, it's showing steadfast love to thousands of those who
Yeah.
love me, right? And when
Yep.
I was prepping for the sermon, I was thinking about Timothy, and Paul reminds Timothy of
Yes.
who taught the word. Who was it? It was his grandma,
Yep.
and it was his mom, right? So
Yep.
he's the third generation believer in that,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
and so what I think what this command is teaching us is that true worship of the true God is contagious for generations and generations and generations. And so the first reason we're not supposed to have other images is because God is jealous, right? And
Mm-hmm.
to give your affection, your love to another image is like for a husband to give his love to another woman who's not his wife. It's outside of it, right? Which we talked about in the previous episode.
Okay, it reminds me a little bit of of Russell Moore's uh,
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
ethical conundrum. You know what I'm talking about?
Uh-uh.
Okay, Russell Moore. So Russell Moore apparently in his ethics class for students would often say, so, it's in the future,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and a guy has to go live on, has a mission to Mars. Can he have his, you know an android representing his wife to satisfy him? It's just like, and so I mean, it reminds me of that image wise, right? It's like
Yes.
mediating
I don't
the
want that image.
relationship. So I know, sorry. So anyways, that's beside the point, but I mean, it's
Yeah.
related, but
Yeah.
so
So the idea
so
is that worship is in worship of the family. Kids seeing their parents worship the true God in the true way is amazing. It has a huge
yeah.
impact in years and years. And
Hmm.
so we talked on Sunday, like that's why we have, I don't know what you would call it, but like we want kids with their parents in worship. because what they get, even this week, like you were preaching this last Sunday, so I was in the back and I saw all the moms taking their kids out, and like I just wanted to tell them it's okay, like this is worth it, this is going to pay off, like
Good job. Good
Good
Yes.
job. Yeah. Because what's happening, even in that disjointed, in for 10 minutes, out for 5 minutes, in, crying, changing a diaper, having to have a conversation, it's like what's happening in that is invaluable. And,
you're
you don't
you're
know.
teaching the value of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
The payoff of that in 20 years is going to be incredible.
Yep. And I think that we need that encouragement, because it's very easy to I guess not parent in faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yep.
just to feel like, well, I don't know, I don't know, like, well, God here gives us you a good thing to put your faith in. Like God's says he's going to be he's going to bless those generations, based on his goodness, right? So
Yeah. Yep.
the that if you're not parenting with faith, like you're trusting God that he's going to work in your kids as you're doing these things, you're going to feel kind of like constantly anxious about how things are going. And I just think it's really important to parent in faith, like trust God. But parent in faith also isn't passive. It's I'm faithfully pursuing God and discipling my children and doing those hard things of having the kids in the service and worshiping alongside them, and all those things, are the living faith of teaching your, believing this promise.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, I think that's a good word for this episode. And what a fun Monday.
Yeah.
Well, Pastor Jon, this has been fun. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to Sermon B-Sides. Until next time, trust Christ, go to church, and love your neighbor. See ya.